7 years ago, we walked into the Beattie Mansion in St. Joseph, Missouri, and it gave us an investigation we've talked about ever since. It was active, unpredictable, and left us with questions we still can't fully answer. So, we decided it was time to go back. Would the house respond again, or had the story changed? Tonight we're returning to find out what happens when a legendary location doesn't give you what you expect. Hello, friends. My name is Marcia, and this is Midwest Ghost Hunters. The first time we investigated the Beattie Mansion, the house gave us a few things we still remember. A basement session that seemed to respond to something I'd done, a door that looked strange until we reviewed the footage and realized I had opened it myself, a whistle on the second floor that we could not trace to anyone living in the house, and the feeling that this place, quiet as it was, still had something moving through it. We knew then that this 172-year-old mansion was worth another look. So, in April, we went back. We wanted to see if the spirits that seemingly roamed these halls 7 years ago were still making themselves known. But this time, the mansion felt different. It was not nearly as active as it had been during our previous investigation. There were no dramatic moments in the basement, no door slams that made us stop in our tracks, no big theatrical pieces of evidence. What we did have was a quiet night, a little REM-Pod activity in an empty hallway, a few noises that had a very earthly explanation, and one important piece of history that deserves to be noted. The Beattie Mansion sits at the corner of Main and Pullen Streets in St. Joseph, Missouri. Built in 1854, it was the home of Armstrong and Eliza Beattie, a wealthy and prominent couple in the early history of the city. Armstrong Beattie was a banker and served multiple terms as mayor of St. Joseph. Eliza was active in volunteer and charitable organizations. They didn't have any children, but they were not detached from the community around them. By all accounts, they were involved, visible, and generous with both their time and their money. If you want a more complete history of the house, we did cover that in our original 2019 investigation, and I'll link that video below for anyone who wants to take a deeper look. The history matters because the Beattie Mansion was not just a private home. It became a place where people lived, recovered, aged, struggled, and in some cases died. A building that holds many layers. It holds family history, community history, and the stories of people whose names may not be remembered as easily as the people who built it. One historical fact worth noting. There is a widespread rumor online that when Mr. Beattie died in 1878, he left Eliza completely destitute, leaving her absolutely nothing in his will. Some stories claim he also endowed a children's home. It's a tragic, dramatic story, but it's completely wrong. During our research, I obtained a copy of Armstrong Beattie's actual will. There were no charitable provisions in the will and no endowment for a children's home. What he did do was leave the house and one half of his estate to Eliza. In today's money, Armstrong was worth roughly $15 million. Eliza wasn't left penniless, but she did elect to take a dower interest in the estate instead. The other half of his wealth went to his nieces and nephews. That does not mean the Beatties were not charitable people. It simply means the story is more precise than the rumors suggest. And to me, that distinction matters. When we investigate historic locations, especially places connected to people who can no longer speak for themselves, we have a responsibility to be careful. A dramatic version of the story may travel further, but the documented version is the one we try to preserve. And in this case, the documented version is still meaningful. This was the modest home of a very wealthy couple who were active in their community. Just before Eliza's death, the property was sold to an organization that used it as a home for people in need, including older adults, people who were alone, and children who needed care. That's a powerful legacy in itself without making it into a more tragic story. The history here isn't a tale of bitter betrayal. It's a story of a couple who love their town. But when a building houses that much life, death, and transition over 170 years, people naturally wonder what stayed behind. The Beattie Mansion has built a strong reputation in the paranormal community. People report hearing children's laughter on the second floor. Some have claimed to see the apparition of Mrs. Beattie in the hallway of the addition. Others have reported seeing Mr. Beattie on the second floor of the original mansion. And then there are the basement stories, where some believe an unhappy male spirit may be present. As with any location that's been investigated many times, the story has grown over the years. We don't dismiss those claims, but we also don't accept them automatically. Our job is to go in, document what happens, and be honest about what we can and cannot explain. When we first investigated Beattie Mansion in June of 2019, the house was fairly quiet, but we did have a few moments that stood out. In the basement, we held an EVP session using the portal. Earlier that night, I had found a quarter on the basement floor and picked it up. Now I know better than to remove anything from a location, even something as small as a coin, but I just instinctively picked it up. During that EVP session, the responses we received seemed to react to that incident. I can't say what caused them, but the timing was interesting enough that it stayed with me.
We're not going to hang around down here forever. Sounded like you said coin.
I thought so too. She brought the coin
I
back.
apologize. I didn't realize the coin belonged to you. Do you need more money?
I do. He just said I do.
He did say I do.
I do. Well, I got $1 in there. I'll bring you $1 in.
Is it okay? What do you need money for? We also captured the sound of a door slamming on the camera audio in the second floor connector hallway. That sound was not captured on any other recording devices we had throughout the house. And we caught what sounded like someone whistling, also on the second floor, in the area where some people have reported activity connected to Mr. Beattie. By the end of that first investigation, we felt that the Beattie Mansion was worth another look. We could not say who, if anyone, was still roaming those halls, but the house had given us enough to make us curious. Walking back into a location years later is always interesting because you bring memory in with you. You remember where you were standing when something happened. You remember the room that felt heavy. You remember the hallway where the audio picked up something you couldn't explain. But right away, we noticed the house felt different from our previous investigation. The location was not nearly as outwardly active as it had been when we were there years earlier. We spent time in the areas connected to the strongest claims, including the second floor and the basement. We set up equipment, we listened, watched, and waited. For hours, the mansion was quiet. That doesn't make it a failed investigation. Sometimes the stillness teaches you more about your own expectations than about the building. In a place with this kind of reputation, it's easy to jump to conclusions when you hear an odd noise in the dark. But as investigators, our job is to look for a logical explanation. And during this investigation, most of our mysterious noises could be attributed to one very alive, very stealthy culprit, the resident cat, Mabel. Mabel had the run of the place, and she made sure we remembered that. There's nothing quite like sitting in a historic mansion in the dark, listening for footsteps or movement, and then realizing the source of your mysterious sound has 4 paws and no interest in your paranormal theories. For every phantom step, faint rustle, or distant thud we caught, we had to consider whether it was Mabel exploring the rooms. After spending some time doing EVP sessions on the first floor, we set up a REM-Pod in the second floor connector hallway that links the original 1854 mansion to the later addition. The rest of the team was gathered inside one of the old resident rooms around the corner holding an EVP session. No one was anywhere near the hallway. And then this happened. We went out to check the hallway immediately. There were no drafts, no insects, and Mabel was nowhere to be found. For a brief moment in that hallway, it felt exactly like it did in 2019, as if someone was stepping across the threshold between the past and the present, triggering our equipment when they thought we weren't looking. That kind of moment is interesting because it's specific. The device was not sitting beside someone shifting in a chair or walking past it. It was placed in a hallway, away from us, and it went off when no one appeared to be around it. Does that prove paranormal activity? No. A REM-Pod's a tool, it's not a conclusion. But it is something we note, especially when the placement gives us fewer obvious explanations. So where does our return to the Beattie Mansion leave us? It wasn't a night filled with slamming doors or disembodied whistles like our first visit, but it gave us a more measured look at the house, a quieter look, a chance to compare one visit against another and remember that activity is not consistent, even in places with a strong reputation. The history here is real. The house was built for Armstrong and Eliza Beattie, who were part of St. Joseph's early civic life. After their deaths, the home became connected to a charitable organization that used it to shelter and care for people who needed a place to go. That alone gives the building weight. The Beattie Mansion is often called the house on the hill, and that name fits. It sits above the street with more than a century and a half of history behind its walls. But after this return visit, I found myself thinking less about the haunted reputation and more about the purpose the house eventually served. A modest home became a place where people in need could live and be cared for. That's not a small thing. It means the story of the house is not only about death or rumors or activity in the dark. It's also about community, about the people who stepped inside that building because they needed somewhere to be. Maybe that's why places like this stay with us. Not because every room gives us evidence, not because every night produces an answer, but because the walls hold more than one kind of memory. Is the Beattie Mansion haunted? We still can't say for sure. What we can say is 7 years ago we experienced some things we couldn't fully explain. Recently, the house was quieter, with one piece of equipment activity worth noting and several noises that likely belonged to Mabel. And somewhere between those two investigations is the honest takeaway. This is a historic house with a layered past, a strong reputation, and a story that deserves to be told. If you've ever investigated the Beattie Mansion or if you visited when it felt especially active or especially quiet, I'd love to hear what you experienced in the comments below. And if you're new here, welcome to Midwest Ghost Hunters. We investigate historic locations and we share what we find, even if it's nothing at all. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and may the truth reveal itself in the shadows.